Welcome back to Small Caps, ladies and gentlemen. You might say, hey, I recognise that face. It wasn't that long ago that Kerry had a chat with Bernard Rowe. He's the managing director of ioneer. ASX code is INR. And if you've been sleeping under a rock, they have the largest, probably the most advanced lithium boron project over in the United States, which is actually where I am right now, though not at the site. It's lithium boron. They've had yet another fantastic announcement out today for a binding offtake agreement. So I've grabbed Bernard before he hops on a plane and comes back to the US to say, tell our community what's going on, Bernard. I only just spoke to you about a binding offtake agreement. That one was with Ford.
Yes, the first with Ford.
About a week ago. So I'm not going to spoil your thunder. Who is it with this time?
Yeah, thank you, Kerry. This agreement is with Prime Planet, which is a joint venture between, or a company set up between Toyota Motor Corporation and Panasonic. So, two of the world leaders in automotive industry and battery technologies.
So that's a pretty big announcement then. So Toyota being the largest car manufacturer in the world, would I be right in saying that?
Yes, they are. That's my understanding. By revenue, they're the largest motor vehicle manufacturer in the world.
What are the terms of the agreement, and has this been a long time in the making?
Yes, it has. I mean, we've been, in negotiation with various parties for quite some time on these offtakes, and that's because these are binding, bankable agreements. So they do take considerable amount of time to negotiate and get all the detail right. Devil's in the detail, as they say, and so. But importantly, they have to be bankable for us. No point having an offtake agreement if it's not. And the agreement itself is for 4,000 tonnes of lithium carbonate to be supplied to the Prime Planet Corporation, and that's over 4,000 tonnes per annum over a 5-year period. So that would take us up to about 18,000 with the existing other two binding offtake agreements that we have in place.
So with this particular one, I wanted to find out, when you said bankable is really important, what does that mean? Forgive me, don't understand.
Yeah, it's a good question and probably a lot of people don't perhaps fully understand what's the difference between binding and bankable. Well, a binding is a legally binding agreement, but then you take that legally binding agreement to a bank to assist in arranging finance. And in our case, our advanced discussions around debt funding are with the US Department of Energy. So in order to qualify for that debt funding, you must have bankable offtake agreements. And so something can be binding and not bankable. The clauses in it, the detail in it, when we take and present it to the banks, in our case, the Department of Energy Loan Programs Office, it must pass certain sort of tests and criteria that mean that the lenders can rely on it. And it's just a high level of scrutiny that gets done and a high level of certainty that must be contained within that agreement, i.e. there's no easy outs, so that the banks can be very confident that if you produce the material, the purchaser will take it and pay for it.
So it's actually like having the gold star, if you like, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. That's right. It gives the lenders a high level of certainty that you'll be able to sell that material under that contract, and then that underpins the amount of debt that you can, and not only the amount of debt, but also the cost of that debt. So, with a highly credible offtake partner, like we have with the Toyota Panasonic Prime Planet, like we have with Ford, like we have with EcoPro Innovation and EcoPro Group, then these are all top tier large organisations with long histories in the fields that we're talking about here, and that bodes well when it comes to discussion with the credit providers for debt.
And where your project, obviously, it's in Nevada. I'm sitting chatting to you at the moment. I'm actually in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of talk at the moment over here about critical minerals and the importance of having that secure supply chain. How important do you think it is with these offtake agreements that you've been doing that your project is a large project and is based within the US?
Extremely important. I would even go so far as to say it's the number one factor with these agreements that we're doing, the fact that this is in the US, because what we're seeing, what we've been hearing about for a long time is a desire to develop a domestic supply chain within the US. But it's been a desire. But now what we're seeing is that put into action. We're seeing OEMs and their partners, particularly the Japanese and the Korean battery makers, announcing plans and already under construction in some cases, cathode and battery cell manufacturing capability in the US, which wasn't there before. That's a work in progress. It's not all, you can't just flick a switch. It takes some years to build this supply chain, but that's really important factor here. And what we've also seen, particularly recently, including just in the last week, is the US government now getting behind this and under the recently announced Inflation Reduction Act introduced by Senator Manchin, that we're seeing incentive programs for electric vehicles for which the lithium-ion batteries are primarily produced or the raw materials for them are primarily produced and refined in the United States or one of its free trade partners. The numbers are quite astounding. They're talking about 40% of the materials quite soon, and up to 80% of the materials in a lithium-ion battery to be domestic or from a free trade partner by 2026. And that's not, as you know, that's not very far away. So, deposits like Rhyolite Ridge, we always knew that it was important and strategic, but there's no question that importance is being elevated every week. And I like to think of this as lithium from rock to road, mined in the wonderful state of Nevada, produced here, and ultimately ending up in electric vehicles that will be on US roads for US customers.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I did want to ask you this. Does this make a material difference in terms of, the project was always going to get into production. This is a binding offtake agreement with one of the largest car manufacturers. How important is this in the sort of the tick the boxes for shareholders and shareholder value? How important is this one, Bernard?
Oh, it's right up there at the top, together with the Ford and EcoPro. But these sort of underpin, if you like, the ability to finance and build this project. That's what these agreements are about. And the fact that this material is then being committed, and legally committed to, and binding commitment to the US EV supply chain, just makes it an incredibly strategic asset and a project that's going to be what we believe will be sort of a cornerstone of the US domestic lithium-ion battery supply chain as it develops, over the rest of this decade.
Any more binding agreements that I've got to go get you back on, or have these ones taken up all the production that going forward for the moment? Are you going to bring me any more surprises, Bernard?
This is our stage one, obviously, that we're talking about here, that we're looking at, building, and feasibility study completed a couple of years ago, and these offtakes relate to that. So, we're going to produce about 21,000 tonnes. We've now got 18,000 under binding offtake agreements. So, no, this is it. We won't be doing any more. In the future, we will, of course, be looking at our options for early expansion, etc. We've got a very large resource, so we can certainly produce well more than 21,000 tonnes a year. But as stage one, which we've been very, very focused on, then this is it. We're complete. So you won't see another offtake agreement from us for a while. But what you will see from us is continuing advancement of the project. As I said, these offtake agreements tie into debt funding, and we are in the late stages of due diligence with the Department of Energy. We've seen them be very active recently in providing large loans, including to Australia's SIRA for graphite facilities in the United States for refining for batteries. We've seen them also providing debt funding for other facilities to produce batteries in the United States. So, we're in that process, and you'll see an outcome of that over the next few months, we hope. Permitting advancing as planned, and our engineering, we're completing that work as well, so that when we do get the debt funding in place and the final permit that we're waiting on in place, from an engineering perspective, we'll be ready to start construction.
Wow.
So there's still plenty of come, but just not further offtake.
Okay, no further offtake. When do you expect construction to start? Because look, the timelines are getting, when do you think you'll start construction? When do you think you're going to be starting to supply?
So the plan is that it'll be the second half of 2023 is when we would commence construction. And that relates primarily to completion of permitting timetable. But assuming the permitting timetable is completed, then we would commence construction late 2023. It's a 2-year build, so we would be first production in the back half of 2025. And you'll see that's what we've written into these offtake agreements with Ford and with Toyota at Prime Planet, that we would be first production ramping up in the back half of 2025.
All right, we're running out of time. I've got to ask you one other thing. I grabbed you now because I believe that you're coming over to the US, to New York, as if he hasn't rung enough bells out there in the marketplace. He's going to ring another one. Why? Is it the NASDAQ, the opening, the closing? What's going on?
Yeah, actually in 24 hours from now, I'm jumping on a plane and flying to New York, and we will be out, the ioneer team will be ringing the closing bell on the NASDAQ on Wednesday afternoon, around about, I think it's 4 p.m. New York time, but we'll put information out about that. But yeah, it's pretty exciting, I must admit, to have worked, as I've worked for many years in the United States with ioneer and the precursor, or the company that was known as Global Geoscience before that. We've had a very long presence. So yeah, from a personal and company perspective, it's pretty exciting to go to New York and be listing the company on the NASDAQ, and particularly with all the success that we've had in recent times.
What about those shareholders out there? Can they see it? Are you going to be Zooming it live, or what are you doing?
There'll be we will put out some information to the market that will give that sort of thing of how people can access it. It will be recorded. I would refer to whatever information that we put out in terms of live streaming, because I'm not 100%. I know there is some live streaming, but I'm not sure if it's open to everyone. So we'll confirm that for you.
Okay, all good. Bernard Rowe, jump on that plane tomorrow. Enjoy the ringing of the bell. Thanks for all the information, all the updates, and congratulations on Prime Planet Energy and Solutions. That is the joint venture between Toyota and Panasonic. More binding offtake bankable agreements done by Bernard and his team at ioneer. ASX code is INR, the Rhyolite Ridge lithium and boron project. Thanks, Bernard.
Thank you, Kerry.